guess what the plumb line is for all of human thought and human behavior? Everything is compared to an expectation. So you can't have a thought where you say, well, I think that person's right or wrong, or I think this needs to be added, unless you're comparing it to something. And so expectation is as low as you go as a foundation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mind Muscle Connection. Joe Klimzeski and Tyler Weeb. Tyler, you decided after all this time, let's do an episode on expectation. You got tired of me mentioning it every episode and thought, hey, let's just do one on that. And I swear I had to go back and look at our entire list of episodes. I thought we had to have done one, and
Right?
we have not. So we get to kind of wrap this up because it is such a foundational schema to everything we do. You and I are talking about cognitive psychology, social psychology, philosophy, worldview stuff, daily living, just everything that we want to incorporate into how do you live your best life. And this is something that keeps coming up. So tell me in your words, because I'm gonna gush, like I'm gonna go off. So I'm gonna let you have the first shot at explaining, what it means to you, just to have that as a threshold expectation in the things that we contemplate, and why you want to do this topic.
Well, it's funny because I was expecting to go first because I was like, well, if I brought up the topic, I'm assuming I'll be the first to go. So I am, not surprised by this. But hey, you know what? Yeah, it's been something on my mind a lot lately. And specifically for me, just lately, I've been thinking about it in the terms of how I interact, with my clients, and what I see a lot on a daily basis. And I know that the theme of expectations has been a very much prevalent one that has ran through, the 25, 30 episodes of what we have done. And, um, so often I find that tension and that conflict and, where someone gives up, if you will, is that gap between expectation and reality. They have this expectation. A lot of times you'll see it. Someone's coming into their very first show and they're like, "Oh, I expect to win my pro card," right? Or you have someone coming in who has yo-yo dieted for years, but they expect to lose 50 pounds in 12 weeks. And so you have to be, as a coach, that reality against their expectations. And so that's kind of where a lot of my thought process has been, and that idea of stuff. I've also then been thinking, how does that apply to me? How do my expectations fit with the reality of things? How does my self-deception fit with my expectations and my reality? And so it just seems to be such a common theme that you see with so many people on why maybe they don't reach somewhere where they have this massive expectation that just doesn't fit with the reality of that context with where they're at in life. If you're someone who wants to lose 50 pounds, but you've got 3 kids, a full-time job, and a husband, and you're volunteering for this, well, guess what? It might take a little bit longer than 25 weeks, right? And so we have to be able to kind of have this balance, because when we have like such these high expectations that don't necessarily maybe fit with the reality, that's kind of just where it's like you almost get blindsided when you really shouldn't have, right? And we kind of have this self-deception, I know that you and I have been talking offline about lately. And so yeah, that's kind of been where my mind has been, with expectations. I'm sure there's multiple ways we could go, but that's kind of where I was looking at it. And how can I be a reality check when someone's expectations maybe get a little bit ahead of them?
Well, I came to it out of almost pure psychological need personally, in that as somebody who has always been high energy, high ambition, ADHD, the uncontrolled side of that is high anxiety. And in fact, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I started seeing several therapists. I was just kind of seeing which voices I could learn from the best. So I started with one and kind of moved to another and was integrating all this information about anxiety. And just reading and thinking, I had this epiphany that I think I've come up with something. like happiness and contentment and my own ability to not feel anxious was the difference, like a mathematical equation. Here is what I expect, and here's what I get. And I remember a definition of anger being anger is just your will being blocked. You didn't get what you want, the parking space or this, culmination of a relationship or whatever. And so you're pissed off. You're not happy. Expectation, what you get. So I thought that's literally it. And you can control both of those levers. You can control your expectations. So I literally thought I had like figured out life. Like I'm going to be like known for this centuries from now. And then I realized other people had been talking about this for a long time, but just in different terms. So going all the way back to the Stoics, because the ancient Greeks, I mean, you had things happening in Egypt, you had things happening in Asia, and even Jesus himself, as recorded in the Bible, was crucified for bringing Buddhist philosophy into Judaism. You look at the Sermon on the Mount, I think we've talked about this, and every single thing he says is just the Tao and, the wise men from the East. All this stuff was happening in Asia. So he was kind of talking about the same things as far as, you expect the law just to be don't murder. Well, I say don't hate your brother, that kind of thing. And it just really softens your attitude. And so when I started thinking about this and talking to other people, I started seeing it in even lines of philosophy. So those Greek Stoics, they didn't say, hey, measure your expectations. They basically just said, don't expect anything. Life is suffering. They borrowed that from Asia, from the East, from Buddhism and Taoism. And just everything that you get that's good is a gift. Like that should be your attitude. And then you see it cycling upward through philosophy. And Schopenhauer was one of the first. Schopenhauer was the biggest influence on Nietzsche. And Schopenhauer is known as the pessimistic philosopher because he was basically taking the existentialist times 10 and saying life is just a fucking nightmare. There's nothing good in it. You might as well go kill yourself. But if you don't, like, at least try to create some meaning, create some happiness. And he really, without expressly talking about expectation, he was saying pretty much expect the worst so that you can have more joy and contentment every time something good happens. So, I've from the time that I really kind of captured this in my own way till now, it has become one of my greatest central schemas. And I can honestly say at 53 years old, I have never been happier in my life. And it's because I do view things that way. I have become a pretty well reasoned existentialist or absurdist in the fact that I do realize you're going to have some good luck, you're going to have some bad luck, some really terrible shit's going to happen to you, some really great stuff's going to happen. You're going to make things happen on your own because you're working so hard. You're going to fail in some areas. You throw all that into the mix of an entire life, and your ability to live happily and with full contentment through that is just to expect it all.
Man, I think we need to make a church, and that's like our main sermon. That was very powerful. That was good. But yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned, some of that anxiety stuff and how that was the catalyst for all of this and kind of set you on this journey, because I think, for myself, that was part of it as well. And having a lot of this anxiety and, going through therapy and, the existential realizations that, growing up in a, quite heavy religious, household community, it was quite a anxiety driven transformation. And, not only was it, part of the existential, but, it was having the anxiety of, in my life of expectations, reality, and, wondering where that line was and trying to figure that out. Like, Mine was a lot more self-confidence based. And there were times I was questioning my sanity where I did not know what to believe, where the line was between expectations, what I was thinking, and then what the reality was. And that was a pretty scary place to be. And having that thought going, like, am I going crazy? Like, and so it can really kind of get you into, that what I'm not too sure, maybe what's a box, if you will, where you kind of just going round and round and round, and it can be so hard to get out of. And being able to have that epiphany, and I think also then accept it, like, emotionally as well. Like, logically it always makes sense, but it's kind of that emotional connection to it where you can start to lower those expectations of things. You can lower your anxiety, your agitability. I always find I'd be so agitated, right? And the smallest things, right? You just be so agitated, line this, line that, traffic. And it's just like, whoa, like, we need to we need to slow down here, right? And we need to be happy that, yeah, I think you said it, in those small moments of, just, sitting in the car with your family, or what have you. It's kind of like we're so conditioned to just go to that irritable part, right? And that negative part. And I know we've talked about this a lot as well, as, hey, take that second, slow down the initial response, and then go from there.
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier today, and just, some of the things I might want to discuss. And I started thinking through all of the philosophical thought changes. And I know you're going through John Vervaeke's series, as I am, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. And he does a really good job of juxtaposing one worldview to the next generationally, and from one philosopher to the next. And you see people, as we should, like you, as I mentioned, Nietzsche was influenced by Schopenhauer, and yet he kind of takes the ball and goes to a different direction, and then somebody takes it from Nietzsche and goes to the different direction. And there are all of these yearnings and searches for some unifying singular meaning of life, or how we should think, how we're motivated, self-determination theory, things like that. And as I said, everybody thinks like they have found the answer, but in all of those pendulum swings and just circular, running around, guess what the plumb line is for all of human thought and human behavior? Everything is compared to an expectation. So you can't have a thought where you say, well, I think that person's right or wrong, or I think this needs to be added, unless you're comparing it to something. And so expectation is as low as you go as a foundation. I mean, you talk about Descartes' foundationalism theories and so forth. You can't get any more base. Like, you have to have whatever you believe, or change in your belief structures creates now a new, almost like a protractor, like a new angle, aligning yourself toward that expectation. And so if you can imagine that as like the center of the solar system, the sun, and knowing that you can control that, you can make your expectation what you want it to be, and then everything reorient around that. That is the whole ball game.
Yeah, because you certainly can't expect people to react, to act how you would like them to. But, like you said, you can control how you act. And that's where I think it really comes down to, in the most simplest of terms, of like, everyone's gonna, do what they do. You might run into, the occasional individual that, is maybe, like you, has that thought process. But I think, and I think you've said this before too, is, or no, it's maybe it was Steph again, kill them with kindness. Like, that's something that we're talking about, this circular pattern that people, like, they expect you to get back at them in an agitable way. That's like kind of what they're almost looking for. And you step out of that circular fashion, and kill them with kindness. That's going to catch most people off guard. And it's going to, for the most part, I would hope, change how that secondary reaction is. And all of a sudden now you've diffused it, whatever situation, and you've, maybe gained a new understanding. Maybe you've changed that person's thought process. It just pays to be kind.
Yeah, and you initially brought up physique sport and expectations in a health pursuit like losing body fat, and that is entirely true. I have so many talks with clients, knowing that 95% of people will gain weight back that they've lost. I mean, you and I, whether it's for performative physique or normal real life goals, we have that kind of an expectation. Going back to expectations, like people expect it to be amazing and perfect, and we know, wait a second, there's a 95% chance you're going to fail. um wow, like
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
double the market standard, I still only have a 10% success rate. That's a pretty dire job to walk into every day. And so for us to continue to discuss with our clients, like, hey, wait a second, as you mentioned, Tyler, maybe going a little bit slower, or maybe this week wasn't the best, but that doesn't mean the whole race is lost. And let's change our orientation to this expectation in a way that you can continue to make progress. And instead of feeling frustrated and like a failure every single day, if you realize you are beating those odds, you're going to be in the slim 5% of people who do this well, and it's long-term lasting change. Like every week of progress should be amazing. I have clients all the time where I have to take screenshots of their long-term charts. Like look what you've done in the last 3 months. I mean, yes, I'm sorry you didn't lose an ounce, yesterday, but wow, let's look at
Yeah.
this. And it is. I
Yeah.
mean, that plumb line of expectation is everything.
Yeah. And it's the better you have an understanding, the more you have an understanding on how something works, I find that plumb line becomes a lot more sturdy. And I'm not talking about, turning off and not accepting new views that can change that plumb line, but the more you can learn and understand what you're doing, why you're doing all of that, it's going to make that plumb line a lot more sturdy and allow you to not have such these wild swings that are going to go back and forth. You're going to be able to stay more closer, to that middle and not get too far away from yourself. So, I think, yeah, just being able to, practice that and have that understanding and being able then to, talk about that, that topic with the client so that they can understand it is just such a massive part of the coaching process. Like I tell people, I'm like, as much research has come out like over the last 20, 30 years on nutrition and health and things like that, we have a pretty good idea on how to lose body fat, in a healthy way. And we know how to balance it out as we come out of it and have sustainable lifestyle. Like we know for the most part, the machinations of achieving a physique, have more muscle, things like that. Right. But yet, why do people fail? Right. We come back to this expectation versus reality where, they've had this expectation where it's, 20 pounds in 3 weeks, this and that, and it's just gotten so out of touch with, what is actually a very simple reality in terms of just the, very basic mechanistic things that we have to do to get there.
Well, I'm gonna close this out with a nod to Stephanie. But I think we need to get like a meme of her in this
I think
Shakespearean philosopher garb.
she has something, her employees joke, she has a Stephanie look.
Okay.
You're in trouble if you get that look, right? And so we could do, superimpose it with a quote.
Well, she said, "Kill him with kindness," and I would add that you will truly become a kinder, more content person if you do realize that when you do feel upset, frustrated, anxious in any way, that it could come back down to expectations. That should at least be evaluated. Did you hear, with all of the changing of the guard with Queen Elizabeth passing away and King Charles now taking the throne? I don't know if you have read these things, but
Not.
there's this funny little viral video of him trying to like sign the Declaration of Transition and so forth, and like the pen breaks and he's like, oh, god damn, fuck, I hate this fucking thing, blah blah blah. And it's like, dude, Chucky, like, slow down, it's just a pen. It's just a pen. It'll be okay. Yeah. But then you realize this is a guy who has a valet who irons his shoestrings every morning and has an aide who puts on the toothpaste on his toothbrush every day. And if it's not perfect, like have to redo it. And talk about expectations, right? If for 73 years that has been your life, your expectations are going to be slightly askew. And I think a lot of us, whatever our station in life, whatever experiences, we tend to forget where we are and perhaps where we've come from. And sometimes you just need that gut check. Like, what is real life supposed to be? When half of the world is going to go to bed hungry today, when 25,000 kids are going to starve literally to death today on this planet, people are at war. Like, maybe I'm okay. Maybe I'm having a little bit better day than I thought. And I think that can really bring our contentment up and our frustration down if we just come back to that baseline once in a while.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, man. Again, good topic. We finally got this in. Like, this should have been one of our very first foundational videos, but expectation, it's everything. Thanks, guys. We will see you next time in the Mind Muscle Connection.